What's up, everyone? Welcome to Fan Sports New York Varsity. I'm your host, Frank Langella, joined by my co-host, Marsilio Langella. And Mars, this is our Week 2 preview for Section 1B, 1C, and D, and the Hudson Valley Football League. But before we get started, I want to welcome Mars to the show. What's up, brother?
Yeah, it's going well, man. The fact that we're in week 2 is already kind of crazy because last week there was a lot of crazy, just outrageous games happening all across Section 1. So I'm really just happy to see that we are in week 2. I want to see what happens next this coming week.
Absolutely, and we want to welcome our audience. We appreciate you guys for tuning in. Make sure if you do like this content to give a thumbs up and subscribe for future content. You can also get access to our content at our website at famsportsny.com. And if you would like to donate to our cause, we are a grassroots group. All our funds come from donations from our fans. We really do appreciate it. You can get access to our Patreon in the description below, as well as our website. Now, diving into what the show is about, we're going to go over the games on slate. We're going to talk about some of the top matchups of the week, and then we're going to pick all the games. So we'll talk about all the games at some point at the end of the show. But let's talk about what games are on slate on schedule. And let's start out the Hudson Valley Football League, Poughkeepsie at Walter Panis. We have Westlake at Putnam Valley. We have Nanuet at Pleasantville in a rematch for the section title game in Class B. We have a C matchup, Croton Harmon at Valhalla. A B matchup, Bronxville at Briarcliff. Hudson Valley Football League, Spring Valley at Ramapo. Another Hudson Valley Football League, Greely at Portchester. And then we have a Hudson Valley Football League, Tappan Zee at Hastings. We have a C matchup, Irvington at Rhinebeck. Another C matchup, Blindbrook at Woodlands. Another B matchup, Hen Hud at Ardsley. Another B matchup, Pearl River at Byram Hills. We have a CD, Tuckahoe at Dobbs Ferry. Another CD, Albertus Magnus at Haldane. And then to wrap it all off, Hudson Valley Football League, Edgemont at Peekskill. So those are the games on slate. Let's dive into some of the top matchups. Mars, first one I want to talk about is a C matchup. Westlake 0-1 at Putnam Valley, who's 1-0. Last week, Westlake lost to Tuckahoe. Putnam Valley won versus Blindbrook. Historically, Westlake 9-2 versus Putnam Valley. They have won 6 straight versus Putnam Valley, including a win last year, 35-14. Starting with Westlake, Mars, in their game last week, it was a back and forth. They eventually took the lead by scoring 20 straight points, but ended up giving it up towards the end versus Tuckahoe, and a tough loss for them. But offensively, this offense looking to get an earlier start, quicker start, and they really can control the time of possession when the run game is going. I mean, they held Tuckahoe last week in the second half, Mars, to 3 possessions. So when they're running the ball, they really can hold on to that ball. And they're going to have to rely on this rush attack. They have multiple backs that they can lean on. A running back, Osia Pinti, and I apologize for butchering his name. He led the way last week, 179 yards and 2 touchdowns. The quarterback, Michael Pagan, 4-10 passing, had 101 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also rushed for 67. Definitely want to be more efficient passing the ball, right? You don't want to be at 40% passing. So definitely look for that. But I do think they're going to try to rely on their strength and be a little bit more efficient throwing the football. Defensively, the number one priority has to be stronger against the run, Mars. Last week, they gave up over 200 yards rushing, especially quarterback runs. And Putnam Valley, again, is going to test it. This defense has athletes who can run. Can they, stop the run, stay strong, and kind of anchor down between the tackle box is going to be big. When I look at Putnam Valley, Mars, they won 34-12 versus Blindbrook last week offensively. They were really strong. They had a really strong run performance last week. They ran over 260 yards, led by their running back, Maester, who had 184 yards and 3 touchdowns. Their quarterback, Cunningham, he also had 88 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. So look for them to run the ball, get some quarterback design runs to test the discipline of Westlake, and see if they're going to match up to them. Defensively, again, you're going up against a heavy run offense, and Westlake likes to use their speed out on the edge. So these linebackers and DBs got to be able to tackle in space. So look for them to rely on guys like Maester, Sparaza, Glenn, who had 5 tackles last week. They're going to have to be big, Mars. What are your thoughts on these two teams?
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at these two teams, obviously formerly in B, so they've been playing each other recently more often, so they do know the way these schemes work. And I think the biggest thing I'm looking at this game is going to be the front, right? I think Westlake and Putnam Valley are going to have to depend on not only their offensive front, but their defensive front to really control the trenches. Westlake is trying to develop the run, and so is Putnam Valley, right? I think that whichever offensive line steps up, opens up the lanes, is really going to help that team create the pacing. If Westlake can do it, let's just say if Westlake can control the pacing, they can just really drain out the clock. And they showed how they could do that last week. And Putt Valley needs to do the same thing in their favor. I think their best trait is going to be, running heavy, using some quarterback runs, and getting some, get their best players the ball and see what they could do with it. So it's going to be interesting. Both sides of, both teams try to do this in their own way. It's going to be a fast game, in my opinion, with all this running going on. But yeah, it's going to be really important to see with this offensive line.
Yeah, when I look up the matchup, Mars, I'm looking at running back Meister and Cunningham of Putt Valley versus these Westlake linebackers. Is going to be my matchup to watch for this game. Let's go to the next one. Another C matchup. Croton Harmon 1-0 at Valhalla, who's also 1-0. This is a league game. Croton Harmon, they won versus Woodlands last week. Valhalla won versus Rhinebeck. Valhalla is 3-1 versus Croton Harmon since 2004. They have won 3 straight, including a win last year, 56-22. But let's start with Croton Harmon. They won 30-8 versus Woodlands. Offensively, they're obviously orchestrated by their quarterback, Jacob Jones. Last week, Mars, 4 touchdowns, 2 passing, 2 rushing. He's a versatile player for them. He can hurt you with his arm and his legs, and he's going to have to play big this week. I mean, he needs to be decisive. They can't make mistakes. You got to get your playmakers the ball in space. But this offensive line is going to be going up against a Valhalla front who's going to be coming after the quarterback, right? So this offensive line is going to have to play big. They're going to have to stay on blocks. They're going to have to be smart when they come with stunts, know where the hot reads are, right? Know where, again, quarterback's got to know where the hot reads are. Offensive linemen, they're going to have to make sure they take away the biggest priorities. But listen, the run game, if they can get some semblance of run game, I think it's not going to be easy versus Valhalla. It'll be a big help. Defensively, they got to be strong versus the run. Their defensive line, Nikic and Nussbaum, I thought were pretty disruptive last week. And this week, they're going up against a lot of speed. I do think Valhalla is going to be attacking the edge a lot of this defense. So I look at their linebacker, Calmieri. He had 9 tackles last week. Ben Reed had 6 tackles and an INT. Gomez had an INT. If they can stop this rush attack, it's not going to be easy, right? Because they go into some of the spread stuff. They'll throw it. They have absolute studs on the outside of Valhalla. They got some skill guys who can create some problems. So this defensive front, when they get into the spread stuff, is really going to have to be disruptive, especially internally. It'll help a lot because it's going to be hard to keep up with these guys on the outside, but they have to have good contain. When I go to Valhalla, Mars, offensively, explosive. I was talking about it previously. They ran for 321 yards on the ground last week, 5 touchdowns, right? So I think they had counted about like 4 30-plus yard plays. And they have multiple weapons. They're running back Foyset. He had a touchdown. But Basiaka Butcher, we know him running the ball as a receiver, jet sweeps, counters. He is really deadly. Or catching the ball. Again, they like to spread it. They'll run to the outside. You'll see some of the screen game action, which they had a really good screen game last week on a jailbreak or wide receiver screen that led to a long touchdown. And, the group has weapons all over. If they can avoid turnovers, Mars, and block the interior of this Croton Harmon defensive line, they're going to move the ball. I really believe it. Defensively, the focus is obviously got to be on the quarterback, Jacob Jones. Croton Harmon has weapons on the outside as well, but Valhalla has some talented secondary guys. I think that can match up pretty well. So to me, if they can just generate some pressure up front, they can also be pretty disruptive. Again, the quarterback runs are going to be really important. Let's see if, again, these linebackers, maybe if they're going to put some extra guys out in the secondary, maybe they're going to load up the box and kind of put those guys on an island. I'm interested to see how Valhalla attacks this. Mars, what are your thoughts on these two teams?
Yeah, I feel like this is a very interesting game because you obviously have, Croton Harmon, has a lot of, they have some weapons. They have, they need to be more efficient in their offense, but they do have some weapons here. And I think that the offensive line, that's going to be what dictates the game for Croton Harmon versus Valhalla. Obviously, opening up the offense is going to be dictated by the run game and whether they can establish this or not. And defensively, it's going to be tough to stop Valhalla because they have speed, they have weapons, and if they get in the open, that can cause a lot of issues. And obviously, Valhalla try to break that contain, right? Try to get to the outside, give it to your speedsters, let them work. If you could do that, you're going to control the pacing of this game. You're going to break away some open big plays because that's what Valhalla does. They can find a way to make the big play when they need to, and they just need, from the defensive point of view, they have to slow up the quarterback and really stop the quarterback run too, right? I mean, so at the end of the day, slow down the run, but really contain this quarterback. Keep quarterback in the pocket. All right, so I think this is going to be a very interesting game all around.
On the matchup, I'm looking at Croton Harmon's wide receivers versus Valhalla's DBs. If I was going to guess, I think Valhalla is going to kind of load the box a little bit, try to generate pressure on the quarterback because they trust their DBs can match up. And can these Croton Harmon wide receivers win these one-on-one matchups and win in space is going to be big. Let's go to the next matchup, Mars. Hudson Valley Football League matchup. Horace Greely, 1-1 at Portchester, who's 0-2. This is a league game. Historically, Portchester is 3-1 versus Greely. They have won 3 straight, but the last time they played was 2017. So it's been 5 years since they played. And, let's start with Greely. They won 23-15 versus Edgemont, a scrappy Edgemont team. Last week, Portchester struggled versus the run. So this could leave an opportunity for Greely in the spread to kind of run the ball. And I look at running back Alex Edenbaum. He had some strong runs, and, they're going to need him to run hard again. But a big shout out to me is their quarterback, Julian Osh. I mean, he played with a messed up thumb. He had a passing touchdown last week, had some big passing plays. I kind of really respected the performance that he had, and he's going to have to continue to be a huge player for them. Defensively, they're going up against option football, Mars. And when we talk about option football, what are the couple things that we harp on? Winning early downs and responsibility. You have to know who your reads are. You have to tackle your reads. You cannot let up. You can't let your eyes wander. You have to focus in on your reads, and Greely's going to be tested. I would imagine that they're going to try to bail out and force Portchester to pass the ball. So expect to see a lot of stunts and pressures, and I think that's a smart decision. When I get to Portchester, Mars, offensively, to me it starts with their quarterback, Colin Taylor. Super athlete. He's got to continue to make smart decisions. This offensive line needs to step up a little bit, right? I think there's just been too many negative plays. They do have some weapons with Colin Taylor and then running back Polanco and running back Velasquez. They got some guys, right? And Colin Taylor is going to lead that way. Because he is a big play waiting to happen. If they could just get some consistency, not turn the ball over, not have these penalties, I think this offense can get back on track. Defensively, listen, you're really going to get the ability to tackle in space. Really does a good job with the spread. They do a good job kind of leveraging you, getting an open field. They're going to have to be able to tackle in space for Portchester if they're going to have a chance to win. And can they cause some pressure on the quarterback? He's a tough guy. Again, playing through injuries and stuff like that. How are they going to be able to contain this offense? When they struggled really badly against the run last week, are they going to be more stout? Marsh, what are your thoughts on these two teams?
Yeah, I feel like this is going to be also another interesting game because Greely does a very great job in their offense where they keep everything, spread everything out, run the ball effectively, and I think that they're going to need to really continue doing this. And defensively, I feel like they're going to have to stop the run from that point of view by setting the heat. Right, they're going to put a lot of pressure on their secondary, but it's going to be up to the front seven to really cause a lot of issues to slow this game down and really allow for their offense to get back on the field. And obviously for Portchester, they need to have their offensive line has to step up big time. They need to create some lanes for their backs and let their weapons make some plays for you. I think defensively it's going to be about stopping the big play, right? Slowing it down. Yeah, having Greely have to be methodical, right? And I think that would be the best route for them on the defensive side. It'll be a very interesting game.
Yeah, absolutely. My matchup is this Portchester offensive line. Like we talked about, hey, they need to step up versus this Greely defensive line. I think it's going to be really important if Portchester wants to get on track. Let's go to the next matchup. Another Hudson Valley Football League game. Mars Tappan Zee 1-1 at Hastings, who's 1-1. The last time these teams played was 2004. And Hastings won that game. It's been a long time since these two teams played. Tappan Zee last week, they lost 25-13 versus Walter Panis. And offensively, I think this rush attack needs to get back on track. I think it needs to be their primary focus. They have a couple backs who can really be bell cows for them. The first one, Ryan Brown, he had a touchdown last week. McCarthy, another one, had a touchdown. When they're running the ball, whether it's one-back sets or two-back sets, when they come to one-back, they have that H-back stuff. It'll open up the pass attack. And, their quarterback, Kiv Leon, he had a big pass play to Tarpey last week. But they like to use wings. They like to use H-backs. They like to out-leverage you. I think that's what the goal is. Hey, let's use some of our muscle. Let's use some of our formations to out-leverage Hastings. But the big focus to me is on the run game. Defensively, the pass defense will be big. I mean, I'm looking at guys like Riley, Martinez, the rest of the DBs. Going to have to match up with some of these talented, skilled guys on Hastings. The big emphasis, though, keep Hastings' quarterback in the pocket. Do not allow him to break contain because that is when he gets very dangerous. So they cannot allow him to get outside. And when I look at Hastings, they won 21-6 versus Peekskill. Offensively, obviously, it starts with their quarterback, Robert Kennedy, who to me is the magician, Houdini-type player. He had a passing touchdown last week. He's got about 4 touchdowns total on the season. He just has magic to him, and he can use his arm, he can use his legs. The big thing for him is not to turn the ball over. Sometimes he does too much. He tries too much, forcing things, which can hurt the offense, but he makes plays when things break down. And I would imagine, again, if you can protect him, allow him to do his magic, he can hit some big plays for you. And another guy, Noah Unger, at the last week, had a receiving touchdown, rushing touchdown. He was big for them. He's going to have to step up and be kind of that target for them. They like to spread you out, throw the ball around, make smart decisions. This offensive line needs to hold up, right? That's going to be the big thing. Tappan Zee is going to be coming for them, right? So they need to hold up if they can. I think they'll be able to move the ball. Defensively, last week, compared to week 0, I thought the defense was stronger. Cartwright, he had a fumble recovery for a touchdown. But they're up against a stronger rush attack this time around. And so they're really going to test the strength of this Hastings defense and their ability to rally. You're going to see 2 running back sets. This defensive front 7, they're going to try to run right at you and also get out on the edge. Can we see this defense be disciplined is the big question. Marsh, what are your thoughts on these 2 teams?
Yeah, I feel like when you're looking at Tappan Zee versus Hastings, I think that they have some very interesting combinations or really matchups, and I think that's what Tappan Zee is really going to try to open up this the way they play by trying to find the best case scenario on who's on who and try to create mismatches in any way, shape, or form. And I really think it's going to be really up to the rush offense and really opening up the plays to then open up the offense to do more. Defensively, I really think that they need to keep contained. I think that the biggest thing for me is from the pass, whether you're rushing the pass or trying to stop the run, the contain. If you allow for Hastings playmakers to get in space, it's going to be bad news, right? And I think Hastings, Robert Kennedy is the dude, right? He's the guy. He can make all the plays that you need him to make. He's very efficient, but sometimes he does take those gambles. I think he's a big risk, big reward, high risk, high reward type of player, right? He can hit those crazy plays, but then at the same time he can make those mistakes. So we got to see what happens here. But I think this is going to be a very interesting game.
Yeah. Let's go to the next matchup. Excuse me, I forgot to get my matchup for this one. My matchup for this game to keep an eye on. I'm looking at Robert Kennedy and him versus these Tappan Zee DBs. Robert Kennedy has that magic to him like we were talking about, Mars, and these Tappan Zee DBs will be tested. So I'm interested to see that kind of matchup right there. Let's go to the next game. This is a B matchup, Mars. Hen Hud 0-1 at Ardsley, who's 1-0. This is a league game. Let's start with Hen Hud. Last week they lost 33-14 versus Byram Hills. If you remember last year, Mars, they had that big upset on Ardsley that shocked some people last season. So I'm interested to see this rematch. It's going to be an intriguing one. But Hen Hud lost to Byram Hills last week. Offensively, I thought I saw some good things, right? They run the wing tee. They got a lot of new faces in there. But, again, with their quarterback Wells, doing some play action, some quarterback runs, and handing the ball off to those guys attacking the C and D gaps like running back Nico Basalga, who had a rushing touchdown last week. I saw some good things from them, right? They obviously can continue to get better. They have solid size to them, but no matter who runs the ball, I'd be running behind their offensive tackle, Dougie Travis. He's a big man who can move bodies. So that's someone I would definitely be focused on running behind. Defensively, Mars, this one was a bit of a surprise last week. I know, listen, Byram Hills is pretty high-powered, but Hen Hud giving up 33 points and a bunch of explosive plays is a bit of a surprise for Hen Hud defense, to be honest, because, listen, I know they have a lot of new faces. You usually don't see these kind of points given up. But I'm expecting Hen Hud to step up a little bit this week defensively. They like to be very aggressive. I think they're going to attack Ardsley, but the number one focus has to be stopping this rush attack for Ardsley. Again, put the ball in the inexperienced quarterback's hands is going to be number one. But I expect to see Hen Hud, I think, defensively and aggressive-wise. I think they're going to step it up a notch. Let's go to the other side, Mars. Ardsley, they won 34-7 versus Briarcliff Hamilton program. The rush attack was very strong. They rushed for over 200 yards last week, led by Vega, who had 122 yards rushing and a touchdown. Silverman, he also had 87 rushing yards and a touchdown. Brendy had a rushing touchdown. Listen, the O-line with a lot of new faces, they showed up. And you know what? I think that's going to be the formula. You get a multiple attack from Ardsley, but I do think running the football is kind of going to be the number one option, which will allow them to, again, hit some pass plays. And as seasons go on, they'll probably be more balanced. But I think the rush attack is going to be the number one thing. But can they hit a couple big plays in the passing game? That's why the rush attack is going to be super important. But they do got to be aware. Hen Hud likes to stunt. Mars. They like to bring the pressure. So as an offensive line and as an offense coordinator, you have to know where they're coming from. And you have to know that when you see them coming, you got to get rid of the ball, right? Because that's where the big negative plays happen. When they catch you on a big negative play, they're a big risk reward type defense, right? So if they catch you on a negative play, put you in a bad spot. Defensively, listen, I actually like what I saw on Ardsley's defense. They're showing that they have some potential developing playmakers. One guy, Chewy Walksmars, had a fumble recovery for a touchdown, interception for a touchdown, right? I mean, that was a tremendous performance he put on. 2 defensive touchdowns. Speckman, he also, young player, he had 5 tackles, half a sack. King had half a sack. This Ardsley defense swarmed last week, and they did a pretty good job. And I'm interested to see them grow as a young defense versus now this winky kind of power offense. It's going to be intriguing. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
Yeah, this is going to be a very interesting rematch because, like you said, Hen Hud having that upset victory, I think definitely kind of put them on the right track. And I think that this game is definitely going to be a test for sure because I think Hen Hud did some good things on offense. They did a great job of running into the outside. I think that they had their offensive line was playing well, but they're gonna have a real challenge this week against Ardsley, and I really think they're gonna have to really step it up. Right, defensively, I think it was surprising to see how many points they let up when at the end of the day, losing 33-14 is a surprise because Hen Hud usually sends the heat, and I think the defense needs to step it up this week. They definitely need to cause more issues, and they need to be efficient. And Ardsley, obviously, they're running the ball very well. I think the question is going to be whether they can continue doing this, and can they hit big plays, right? I think that's going to be the question of the day for me. And obviously, I think defensively, they have to step it up big time. They need to continue using these skill players that they have, the playmakers, and just be efficient, right? Do not allow the big plays and be smart in the red zone.
Yeah, in my matchup, I'm looking at the offensive line of Hen Hud versus this Ardsley defensive front. Saw some impressive things from some of the young players on Ardsley. This offensive line of Hen Hud, and they continue to battle and grow and move people. All right, let's go to the next matchup, Mars. Our last 2 that we're going to break down before our game picks. This one is a CB matchup. Tuckahoe 1-0 at Dobbs. Ferry is 1-0. This was a very entertaining game last year, if you remember, Mars. But historically, Dobbs Ferry is 11-2 versus Tuckahoe. They have won 6 straight, including that win last year where they won 34-20 in a fun game last year. But let's start with Tuckahoe. They won 35-32 versus Westlake. Offensively, they had over 200 yards rushing, and they had some big plays in the passing game as well. This was a pretty well-oiled attack that Tuckahoe had last week. And it starts with their quarterback, Annunziata, who was a baller last week. 134 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns, had a game-winning touchdown, also 9 of 17 passing, 151 yards. John Banky, we know about him, very talented player, 3 catches for 80 yards. Their running back, Smith, had a really strong game. 107 total yards, 2 touchdowns. Again, this was somebody who was to keep an eye on when we talked about it in the team previews. But listen, balance will be huge for this offense. I mean, they can make plays both in the air and running the football, and that balance is really important. And so it's going to be interesting against Dobbs Ferry's front. Can they have the same success running the ball? But Annunziata is a game breaker. He can make some big time plays, and so I'm interested to see, Tuckahoe's focus is running the football. They'll run with the quarterback. They'll run with their running back. I think that is their number one priority. But they can hit some plays in the passing game. When they go into the pass, can they protect up front? It's going to be huge. Defensively, it wasn't, I think, their top performance, Mars. They gave well over 200 yards rushing last week. In the second half, they couldn't get off the field, right? Their offense only had 3 possessions in the second half. The defense just couldn't make enough plays. And again, you're going up against the bump and grind rush attack of Dobbs Ferry. So you're going to have to do a better job of kind of generating some negative plays and getting Dobbs Ferry behind the sticks is going to be huge. They got to swarm to the ball. One guy's not going to tackle Dan, right? So you need to swarm to the ball, multiple guys on him. And that's, forcing Dobbs Ferry to pass the ball with, again, an inexperienced quarterback is going to be huge. Dobbs Ferry ahead of the chains, you're in big trouble. When I go to Dobbs Ferry, Mars, they won 22-7 versus Albertus Magnus last week. Offensively, no, right? They're running some of the option stuff, the wing T stuff, concepts. And, they can hurt you inside running with that bell cow and Dan, right? He had 126 yards and 3 touchdowns last week. And then attacking on the outside with Harmon, he had 104 yards rushing. So, again, 2 guys over 100 yards rushing. That is kind of the dynamic duo that they have. The interesting part to me is who else is going to step up, right? Those are the 2 big horses. Tuckahoe, they're trying to bail out to stop Dan. Doesn't mean that it's going to happen, right? But who else can step up and help this offense? Is it the pass tag? Is it their young quarterback? That's going to be the question. And how this offensive line blocks Tuckahoe is going to be another one. They have some solid size up front. Can they move those bodies? I think they have an opportunity that they could. Defensively, and listen, they have to contain Annunziata. He's really tough too. But, on the design quarterback runs, try to keep him in the box. And on these scrambles, they cannot allow him to scramble and get those, when plays break down, making a play out of nothing, right? You cannot allow him to live like that. It's going to be really important that they stop that. Drexel Lewis last week, Mars, he had 2 INTs. He was a big guy creating turnovers. If they can create some turnovers and get their offense the ball, again, where they can bump and grind and control time of possession, things will go well for Dobbs Ferry. Mars, what are your thoughts on these two teams?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a very interesting game all around. It's very entertaining games from last year. I think, when you're looking at Tuckahoe, I think that they have a lot of playmakers on their team, especially on the offensive side. I think that the question is going to be, how does this offensive line play against a strong front from Dobbs Ferry? And I think that they just need to be more efficient defensively. They need to win first down again, especially since Dobbs Ferry is going to run a run-heavy offense. You want to set them back, cause them to get a little sweaty, and try to hopefully make up the ground there. Dobbs Ferry obviously has guys like Brian Dan who can make big plays, right? And they need to their offensive line needs to open up lanes for Brian Dan. I think at the end of the day, if they can, he's gonna just rumble through there, and it's gonna be hard to tackle him with one guy. Defensively, they need to keep the edge, set the edge, just try to stop Tuckahoe from getting to the outside, because they can also run very well too. So it's gonna be interesting to see what happens here.
Yeah. All right, Mars, let's go to the game of the week, and it's the B matchup. Rematch of the section title game. Nanuet 1-0 at Pleasantville, who's also 1-0. These two teams have been actually pretty evenly matched when you look at historically, Mars. Pleasantville is 9-8 versus Nanuet, but they have won 2 straight, including the section title game last year. But there's a lot of back and forth historically between these two teams. But let's start with Nanuet. I mean, they won 22-14 versus Bronxville last week, and when you look offensively, Mars, we know they have the physical rush attack, right? They're going to bring in a tight end. They're going to bring in fullback. They'll bring in cheater backs. They'll bring tackle over, tight end over. And the gaps are going to be like 2 inches, right, between the linemen, right? So they want to be physical with you. They want to out-muscle you. They want to out-grind you. And they're going to give the ball to their boy, James Moran, who, again, he is a stud for them. He had 107 yards last week, 107 and a touchdown. He is kind of the focal point of this offense. But what impressed me, Mars, watching Nanuet, was the quarterback play, right? Max Valise, he had his first career start. He had 2 passing touchdowns last week, including the go-ahead touchdown to Logan Stemmerman. Again, he had a receiving. Naya Mola had the other receiving touchdown. If the pass attack and play action stuff can be consistent, like we saw, at times last week, this opens a new dynamic for this offense, right? And again, there's a new quarterback coming. They had a very good athlete at quarterback last year that ran the ball, but passing the ball is going to be an interesting one to me. And we'll see how much kind of spread concepts that they do, but I'm expecting to see a lot of heavy stuff. And this offensive line being physical. They're not very big, but they are physical and they're tough. And I think they're going to try to test the will of Pleasantville's defensive line, who a lot of us figure is a strength of that defense, right? But that's what the Nanuet does, right? So I do think play action out of that is going to be big, but it starts with heavy sets. Defensively, they were a bend but don't break, and you saw that again last week. They made some timely stops, Mars. They forced some big turnovers, and they caught Bronxville a couple times. But they don't shrink at the moment. When big moments come around, it seems like Nanuet's defense come up with big plays. And we know about Flanagan and stuff like that on the defensive line. We know Moran, as a defensive back. And obviously the number one priority, right, is to contain Picard. And when you're playing against Pleasantville, Picard is going to have these type of Houdini plays. But if you could prevent these big plays and force Pleasantville to drive down the field efficiently, can Pleasantville do that consistently? That's the question, and that's what Nanuet needs to focus on. Do not allow Picard to blow a game open with one of his Houdini plays, right? It feels like there's one every week. Nanuet's focus is do not let him hit us with a Houdini play, right? That's got to be the focus.
Yep.
Going to Pleasantville, Mars, and I'll give it up to you. They won 21-0 versus Pearl River offensively. We talk about Daniel Picard, right? The magician, 153 yards, touchdown reception, passing touchdown. That ridiculous receiving touchdown he had by the sideline where it just felt like bodies were there, but he just wasn't going down. Just ridiculous. Aiden Picard had a passing touchdown. Emmett McDermott had that receiving touchdown. The question always, it feels like these last few years for Pleasantville, is we know Picard, right, is going to get his, but who else is going to step up? Aiden Picard had a passing touchdown last week. Emmett McDermott had that receiving touchdown. Who is going to be this week, right? Who's going to be that? Because obviously the focus, and that doesn't mean they're going to stop him. The focus is to stop Daniel Picard. I imagine that they're going to move him around. But who else is going to step up for Pleasantville? And how this offensive line against a physical defensive front of Nanuet is going to hold up? I do think the offensive line, I wouldn't say it's their best performance last week, right? But, they were good enough. And, that's the thing. They were good enough. Defensively, Mars, I said this too. You hold Pearl River to 0 points, right? When you shut somebody out, you think you had a tremendous day. I actually don't think that they played their best game defensively. And they still put up a donut, right? Because you know what they did? They had some timely stops, right? And even though there were times that Pearl River moved on them, they came up with some timely turnovers and some timely stops. Hodzinski had an INT. Coleman had an INT. And, that to me is a sign of a good defense is when even things are not perfect, can you make timely stops? And they did. So that's going to be a big one, obviously stopping these heavy sets. Really going to test the physicality of the front seven of Pleasantville this week, right? And that's what we're going to see. Can they hold up physically versus these run-heavy sets? Because if they do and get Nanuet behind, that'll really put the test because Pleasantville does a good job of pressuring quarterbacks. Then get them behind and that pressure quarterbacks, that's usually when turnovers come. Marsh, what are your thoughts on these two teams?
Yeah, this is going to be a showdown. Nanuet was itching for what happened last year, so they're going to really try all the stops. And we all know how Nanuet plays. It's a heavy, try to outmatch the amount of plays you have on one side of the center, and you really try to get to the outside and get their skill players the open space. So I really think Nanuet's going to try that again. And obviously James Moran, being as good as he is probably going to be the main target of all this. And I think from the offensive side, they just need to be consistent, right? Defensively, they forced a lot of turnovers last week. So the question is, can they do that again, right? If they can, then at least keeps their offense back on the field, and they have to just chip away. So that's going to be the big question I have for Nanuet. And for Pleasantville, obviously, Dan Picard is a fantastic talent. The question is going to be, who else is going to step up big time? Now, last week you had Emmett McDermott had scored. Dan Picard scored. There's a lot, and he also, he threw the touchdowns to Emmett McDermott. So you're really looking to see other players step up and make plays, right? Whether it's younger guys like Eric Coleman, or you're gonna have the veteran guys like the offensive line. Like they have to step up all the way around in order for this offense to really be more explosive. And defensively, they like you said, they gave 0 points, but it was a bend but don't break defense. They were getting driven on, but they stepped up when they needed to, and I think that was the kind of the key thing here. So let's see what happens next year. Let's see if this defense can show up when it needs to earlier in the game and not later on.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about a couple keys, Marcy. You can make a comment. My first one is the red zone efficiency, and that's for both sides of the ball. I do think, again, interested to see how Pleasantville defense plays this time around. Are they going to be more bend but don't break again? It's going to be up to, again, the physicality of that offensive line of Nanuet and physicality of the defensive line. But they made timely stops last week, and Nanuet made timely stops last week. So when teams get close to the red zone or into the red zone, does the defenses step up, right? Do they create those stops that they were doing in the past? And we're going to see that again this time around. And my second one, the pass attack for both teams. I was impressed what I saw from Nanuet. Pleasantville still a question mark, but Aiden Picard had a passing touchdown. Daniel Picard had a passing touchdown. How are these two pass attacks going to look this week? Right, that's going to be a big key to me, Mars. Any thoughts before we go to matchup?
I think the biggest thing is going to be the front, right? Whether it's the defensive front trying to stop Nanuet from Pleasantville's perspective to stop Nanuet from going to the outside, or even from the offensive line perspective of really trying to keep everything efficient and blocking who you need to block and creating some lanes for your skill guys, because obviously you have Nanuet with James Moran and Pleasantville with Daniel Picard. You're going to have two high-powered backs here, and you're going to have some very interesting matchups. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yep, my matchup, Nanuet offensive line versus that Pleasantville defensive line. I think physicality on physicality right there. And my players to watch, I'm going to give you, it's usually player to watch. I'm going to give you players to watch. I'm looking at both quarterbacks. Nanuet, Max Felice, and Aiden Picard. Right, they're looking for somebody outside Moran, outside Daniel Picard. Who's going to make plays for them? Maybe it's the quarterbacks. This could be a big opportunity for both of them. All right, Mars, let's go to our game picks. And we're going to talk about each one of the games. We'll pick all of them. Last week, I went 13-2. Mars went 12-2. Load went 11-4. So, Mars, me and you tied in losses. You obviously don't pick one of the games, so pretty good performance. Let's continue it this week. All right, first one up, Mars, Hudson Valley Football League game. Poughkeepsie 0-1 at Walter Panis, who is 1-1. This is a non-league game, and I look at this Poughkeepsie team again. A lot of new faces. Burtson, the quarterback, Jalen Lee. See if he can complete some passes over to him. He made a nice couple plays. Jason Johnson also was all over the field last week, led the team in tackles. But I want to look at Walter Panis, Mars. The rush attack really exploded. Ronga had 156 yards and 2 touchdowns. Carlucci had over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. But what's going to dictate this game for me? Defensively. I think Walter Panis defensively, they forced a couple turnovers last week. Reisner has been solid for them. They blocked the punt. I think it continues this week. I'm going Walter Panis.
Yeah, I'm also going to go Walter Panis. I think they have some skill guys on their squad that does give them the advantage. I think their rush offense is definitely going to be up to par, as well as just excelling. And their offensive line needs to make some big plays. I'm going Walter Panis.
Let's do a C matchup, Mars. Westlake 0-1 at Putnam Valley, who's 1-0. There's a league matchup here. This was another tough one. Again, both teams. Westlake struggled to stop the run last week, but they had a real strong rush attack. Putt Valley really had a strong rush attack last week as well. What is going to give here? I think Westlake bounces back. I'm going to go with Westlake. Historically, they've been pretty strong versus Putnam Valley. I think it continues this time around. I think the defense of Westlake starts off a lot faster than they did last week. The offense continues to run the ball and control time of possession. I'm going Westlake.
Yeah, I'm going to go Westlake as well. I think that they will set up a really good rush offense for themselves. And I just think that Putnam Valley just doesn't have enough right now. And I think Westlake's going to pull away here.
Croton Harmon 1-0 at Valhalla, who's 1-0. This is a league game. We broke this game down. This is a tough one. Croton Harmon, again, I talked about preseason. I like this team. This team could surprise some people with their skill guys and some of the play up front. But I'm going to go with Valhalla. They have too many weapons out on the edge. One of the best players in the class in Basiaka Butcher. Again, mixing it up between the run attack and the spread run and some of the pass concepts. I think it's just a little too much for Croton Harmon's defense. I'm going Valhalla.
I'm also going to go Valhalla. I think I do agree with you completely. They have too many skill guys on this team. Get them in space. They're going to make some plays. I'm going to go Valhalla.
Let's go to a B matchup. Bronxville 0-2 at Briarcliff Hamilton, who's 1-1. Another league game. Briarcliff Hamilton had a tough game versus Ardsley. They still have some skill guys with, again, Raphael, Saw, Adam Harris. When I look at Bronxville, Mars, they were really in that game. It was a 14-14 game versus Nanuet last week. They played 2 tough opponents back-to-back and were in both games. I think Bronxville, again, going to rely on the run a little bit more this time around, use some of their size to their advantage. But to me, the big thing is turnovers, right? If they reduce their turnovers, they will really have a chance to win, and I think they will this week. I'm going with Bronxville to bounce back and get a victory.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. I feel like when you looked at the Bronxville-Nanuet game, there was, I think, total of 4 turnovers that game. I think at the end of the day, that's a lot. And if they were to not get a turnover at least two of those times, then the game, I think, would have been a lot closer than what it was. But, yeah, I think Bronxville is going to win here. I'm going to go Bronxville.
Let's do a Hudson Valley Football League game. Spring Valley 1-0 at Ramapo, who's 1-1. This is a league game. And when I look at Ramapo, they have one of the best athletes out on that field. Rashawn Griffin, Mars, he had a punt return touchdown, a passing touchdown, and a rushing touchdown last week. He just needed a receiving touchdown, and he would have hit for the cycle in football, which is pretty unbelievable. And maybe a defensive touchdown, I think. But you know what? I think that's good enough. But on the other side, Mars, Spring Valley, Noah Chambers. What a game he had. 241 yards rushing last week. The quarterback, Scott, had a rushing touchdown, passing touchdown. Expect to see a lot of speed out on the field, but I'm going to go with Spring Valley. I think they're going to be very aggressive defensively, create some extra negative plays, and Spring Valley figuring out that rush attack I think is big for them. I think Noah Chambers has another big game. I'm going Spring Valley.
Well, I made the bet that Spring Valley would win the HVFL, so I'm going to go with my boys from Spring Valley. I think they have a lot of ability, a lot of talent, and they definitely have been improving. I'm going Spring Valley.
Hudson Valley Football League game. Greely 1-1 at Portchester, who's 0-2. We broke this game down, Mars. Listen, Horace Greely has really impressed me over these last 2 years now. I think they won against a scrappy Edgemont team last week. They were close against an Ossining team the previous in week 0. I do think they're a little bit banged up, which is going to be intriguing to me. Can they run the ball consistently enough? Portchester, to me, if this offensive line could step up, they have the skill guys to make plays. At Portchester, I'm going to go with the upset. I'm going to go with Portchester here. I think they get their first win of the season. They're going to make enough plays on the defensive side of the ball. This offense gets a little bit more consistent this week. I'm going Portchester. Might surprise people.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Greely. I think that they will, have the advantage. They're gonna spread. They're gonna, try to open it up, and I think they'll be successful. I think that obviously Portchester is a solid team. I think it'll be closer than what people expect, but I'm still gonna go Greely.
Let's go to another Hudson Valley Football League game. We broke this one down. Tappan Zee 1-1 at Hastings, who's 1-1. Again, Hastings got Kennedy. They got some skill guys. The question for me is up front. Can they hold up enough? Tappan Zee's rush attack, I think, gets back on track this time around. I'm going Tappan Zee. They're going to control the game a little bit more. I think they force a turnover or two, give them an extra possession. Tappan Zee wins this game, and it's by running the football.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. I think Tappan Zee will get the advantage. I think their run game is going to improve. Their offensive line is going to get some push. I'm going to go Tappan Zee here.
Let's go to a C matchup. Irvington 0-1 at Rhinebeck, who's 0-1. This is a league matchup, Marsh. When I look at Rhinebeck, again, a lot of young players, a lot of hungry players, but they're still trying to find their consistency, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Can they prevent enough big plays? When I look at Irvington, Marsh, they were up 14-0 on Haldane before Haldane came back and won that game. I want to go with Irvington, the guy to keep an eye on, running back, Marcus Cannon, 122 yards rushing and a rushing touchdown last week. Coaches have raved about him before the season. I expect him to have another big game. I'm going to go with Irvington.
Yeah, I'm also going to go with Irvington. I just think they have too much for Rhinebeck, and I think they're going to open it up. Yeah, let their playmakers make some plays. I'm going Irvington.
Go to another C matchup. Blindbrook 1-1 at Woodlands, who's 0-2. Listen, Woodlands, they've just given up a little bit too many big plays. Offensively, still trying to figure things out again. It's about consistency. Got a new program, trying to get used to the, again, with the scheme, terminology, all this stuff right here. It's going to take time. And again, I don't think it's going to happen this week. I'm going to go with Blindbrook. I think they struggled to stop the run last week. They probably will give up some big plays, but I'm looking for Carey, Minnick, D'Inverno as a trio to make some big plays for Blindbrook. I think the offensive line steps up. I'm going Blindbrook.
I'm also going to go Blindbrook. I do agree with you. I think that Woodlands has a lot of young players, and they're going to get better as the season progresses, but we're still in the beginning. I'm going Blindbrook.
Let's go to a B matchup. Hen Hud 0-1 at Ardsley, who's 1-0. This one was one of the toughest ones for me to pick this week. Hen Hud, I believe, is going to step up defensively. And offensively, I saw some good things that can kind of translate to the following, to this game. Going up against a young Ardsley team. But I like the coaching at Ardsley. I like the young players that stepped up defensively. They have some playmakers. I think this is going to be a very close game, but I'm going to go with Ardsley here to win in a close fashion.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that Hen Hud kind of lost some of its edge when it came to its defense. And maybe I'm going to push Hen Hud to be more stout defensively because I said that, but prove me wrong, right? I think that Hen Hud usually has a lot more grit in their defense, and I think that Ardsley is going to have just too many weapons. I'm going to go Ardsley here.
Another B game, Pearl River 0-1 at Byram Hills, who's 2-0. Listen, I got to say, I was impressed by Pearl River up front. They moved Pleasantville around a little bit defensively, but they just couldn't finish drives. And that's going to be another big concept, not turning the ball over. I think this is a tough week for them against Byram Hills, who offensively can be very explosive, running the football with Jaworski. Their quarterback at Curso had 2 touchdowns last week. If they get consistent quarterback play, Byram Hill's offense is going to be a lot of trouble. But Pearl River will have, they'll have some success because of that front up front, because of their rush attack. Can the young quarterback continue to make plays without turning the ball over? I don't think it happens this week. I'm going Byram Hills.
Yeah, I'm going to go Byram Hills too. I just think their offense is too high powered. I think overall as a team, I think they just have more skilled players there. I think Pearl River did a lot of great things last week. They played tough, but I just think Byram has too much. I'm going Byram.
Let's do a CD matchup. Albertus Magnus 0-1 at Haldane, who's 1-0. Feels like these two teams play a lot of close games these recent years. Haldane defensively only gave up 1 touchdown last week, and their quarterback, we know about Van Tassel, very talented player who can throw and run the football. But their running back and defensive end, Gianchinta, is their biggest playmaker, right? He had 123 yards rushing and a touchdown, had a fumble recovery for a touchdown. Albertus Magnus gave over 200 yards rushing last week for Dobbs Ferry. The offense struggled last week. They threw a couple INTs. And even all that, giving up over 200 yards, throwing multiple INTs, right? They lost 22-7, right, versus Dobbs Ferry. I'm going to go with Albertus Magnus. I actually think they don't turn the ball over as much, and if they can slow down Gianchinta, I think their secondary matches up pretty well. I'm going to go with Albertus Magnus in a very close game.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. I think Albertus Magnus, if they limit the turnovers, I think they'll be okay. I think they'll be a lot better than were last week. I'm going to go Albertus Magnus. It'll be a close game, but I'm going with them.
Hudson Valley Football League game, Mars Edgemont 0-1 at Peekskill, who's 0-1 in a league game. When I look at Peekskill again, I thought they fought, and they were pretty gritty last week. Xavier Jacobs had a rushing touchdown, and again, a lot of new faces, a lot of juniors. It's going to take some time, right? When I look at Edgemont, they played really, really tough, and I think Gio Leonardo is going to have a huge game in this one. Edgemont is going to have the advantage up front. I'm going with Edgemont.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Edgemont as well. I think that they just have too many skilled players. I think that Peekskill is still kind of that growing program. They played tough. They just don't have enough. I'm going to go Edgemont.
All right, let's go to a CD matchup. Tuckahoe 1-0 at Dobbs Ferry, who's 1-0. This is a non-league game. This one was really tough for me to pick. I think Tuckahoe is going to look for revenge in this game, Mars. And I love the rush attack from Smith and their quarterback Annunziata. They have playmakers, but they also struggled to stop the run. And Dobbs Ferry, again, very talented running football team with Dan, with Holman. I'm going to go with Dobbs Ferry. I think it's going to be close. They're going to control the tempo of this game. They will make enough plays defensively against this high-powered Tuckahoe offense, but I'm going to go with Dobbs Ferry in a close one.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Dobbs Ferry as well. I think the fact that they're going to control the pacing of the game because they have such a powerful run offense that they'll just continually drain the game away, really run out the time essentially. And I think this will be kind of in Dobbs Ferry's possession. I'm going Dobbs Ferry.
Let's go to the game of the week, Mars, the B matchup. Rematch of the section title game. Nanuet 1-0 at Pleasantville, who's 1-0. You're not going to pick this game, Mars, but what are your thoughts?
Well, I think this is going to be a very interesting matchup. I think a lot of people are expecting it to be one-sided, but I think it's going to be pretty even. I think at the end of the day, Nanuet's going to try to do what they always do, and it's going to overpower you and try to get to the outside and out-mismatch you. And I think Pleasantville's going to do what they do as well. I think they're going to run the ball. They're going to throw in those opportunities when they're available. But they have a lot of veteran presence, especially on the up the defensive and offensive lines. And it's really going to be up to their young guys to really fill in the roles that they need to, right? Daniel Bacard is going to be a top level, is still an always top level talent. The question is going to be who else is going to be there to step up and make big plays. And I kind of want to see which guy is going to do it. So it's going to be a very interesting game for sure. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and this has been a really interesting game to me, this matchup, this rematch. And both teams have a physicality to them. We have the veteranness of the Pleasantville defensive line and offensive line versus kind of that tough grittiness of that front of Nanuet. And they're going to bring in those heavy sets. And we have two of the most talented players, Daniel Bacard and Moran, going at it, right? And so this is going to be really intriguing. I'm interested to see these quarterbacks go at it. And Nanuet has a real toughness and grit to them that I like. They also have probably one of the best social medias in Section 1 football. They do actually a really good job. But I'm going to go with Pleasantville. And again, I do think the championship kind of pedigree and veterans are important in games like this. Now, Nanuet does have a couple of them too that were in that section title game. But I think Pleasantville kind of responds. Defensively, they played good. I do think they'll play a little bit stronger this time around. The question, again, like you said, offensively, who else is going to step up? I think they make enough plays. I do think you see one more Daniel Picard Houdini play. And that'll be enough. This one I feel will be low scoring, but I'm going to go with Pleasantville. All right, everyone, that was our show. Thank you guys so much for watching the show. Make sure to give a thumbs up and subscribe for future content. Enjoy this weekend's games. Thank you guys again so much. We'll see you all very soon.